Welcome. I'm Matthew Phelps, co-author of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, The United Kingdom of Israel, Foreshadowing the Reign of Christ the King. Today we'll be talking about Lesson 4 of our study, which covers chapters 14 and 15 of the first book of Samuel. Where we left off, the Israelites are preparing to go into battle against the Philistines. So they've gathered their troops, the Philistines and their 3 companies and their army all gathered together against a much smaller number of Israelites. So Saul has just displeased the Lord by taking upon himself the duty of sacrifice. But just because God is pissed doesn't mean the armies aren't there. So the armies are still gathered together, and we still expect some kind of confrontation. So, during this whole thing, Saul's son, Jonathan, decides to take upon himself a task of at least scoping things out and maybe more. So, himself and his armor bearer, who says, yeah, I'm definitely with you, whatever you want to do, yeah, let's just go do that. So they head off, they go find in a pass a garrison of the Philistines. And here we see, maybe unlike Saul, Jonathan is both super willing to murder Philistines and very dedicated to the will of the Lord. So he devises a plan that in essence is, if God is with me, then I can't possibly lose. And if he's not, I'm just not going to do it. So he devises a sign, has a whole plan. He and his armor bearer go in. The plan comes up on the side of murder Philistines, and then they kill 20 of them at the garrison. Totally without approval or knowledge of Saul. And as a result of that, that has a definite impact on the morale of the Philistine camp. But we'll come back to that in just a minute. So that's going on kind of over here. Saul doesn't know about it. Meanwhile, after having already offered the sacrifices he wasn't supposed to, he has the priests bring the ark around. They're all standing around the ark of God, because that's how you get God on your side when you've been told explicitly by the person whose job it is to tell you what God thinks that you screwed up. At least you can bring the ark around. So that's what he's doing. And then he sees panic in the camp of the Philistines without knowing why. And being the great military leader that he is, he decides it's time to attack. So he launches an attack plan. Brilliant plan, everybody just go kill them. And in the confusion, it turns out the Israelites are also killing Israelites because there was no very clear plan. More examples of Saul's amazing military leadership. But ends up, because there is so much confusion on the other side as well, and everybody's being rushed by Israelites with some sort of weapons, be it farm implements or probably that, and not swords, because we know they didn't have iron swords. It still is going pretty well. So the other people who can claim kinship to the people of the Israelites, the Hebrews, important distinction, Hebrews different from Israelites, descendants of Abraham, not descendants of Jacob, couple generations down the ladder there. But still can claim definitely kindred spirit in Abraham. Common lineage. Decide, we see how this is going. We're going to start murdering Philistines too, which probably plays a large part in the victory. So, Israelites and Hebrews are winning. All the people who've been hiding see that they're winning, decide probably that they want a share of the loot, or at least they don't want to be numbered among the people who didn't bother to show up, or both, and decide to come out and join in as well. And against all odds, and not because of any kind of solid leadership on the part of Saul, the day is won. What a glorious victory. And Saul, in response to this victory, does what any good leader would do. He acts rashly. So we see Saul, proclaim, it's great that we're winning and all, guys, but we need to, like, super win. So nobody stop to eat anything, just keep murdering Philistines. That's all you get to do. And he does a weird thing. He swears an oath, but he doesn't, and although he does commit himself to it, he commits all the people as well. It's a weird oath. It is just, let's not eat anything until evening so we can keep murdering Philistines. And I'll kill anybody who does. Which is more like a rule than an oath, but it's clearly called an oath. And the reason that it is an oath instead of just a rule of the king, whatever, is that he binds himself and the people to it by God, which seems to be an authority that the king has. It's not explicit that it's by God, but an oath necessitates that there is some involvement of God, and we see later the invocation of God when we're talking about the consequences of this particular act. So Saul is saying, hey, everybody, definitely don't eat anything, just kill Philistines. Communication channels in the army are actually pretty effective. Almost everybody knows about it, except the two people who are not around, Jonathan and his armor bearer, because they've been off securing the victory. So they come back, they're wandering around, they've joined back up with the troops, they're wandering around the forest, and they see some honey, which is delicious, and Jonathan eats some of the honey. And then, this is also a little weird, then the people who are with him say, you weren't supposed to do that, but they don't say that until after he's done it. Kind of a weird sequence of events, but that's how it happens. Jonathan eats when his father has made this oath. And then everybody says, no, your dad said we're not supposed to do that, or we'll get killed. Jonathan's response isn't, oh, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. It's, everybody's super tired, and look at how refreshed I am after having eaten just a little bit of honey. Like, we all should have been doing that so we can murder more Philistines. Which, because I have so much more energy. My eyes are bright, I'm enthusiastic, I'm ready to go. I don't get what's going on here, but okay, I guess. We'll figure it out. But Jonathan, who is the one who won the day, not probably in spite of his father's military leadership, has broken this oath, which creates a problem that we will have to address. Where we left off, we've seen that Jonathan has just gone against his father's oath or commandment, and we have seen foreshadowing of great problems to come potentially from that. Now we cut back to the people. As you remember, that commandment is, don't bother eating anything, I need you to be busy killing Philistines. And so the people, in their great effort and hunger, have gotten over-enthusiastic for food, have decided to start diving in without proper time for preparation or for correctly dealing with the food, and they've started killing animals and eating them with the blood in, which is a big no-no going back to the book of Genesis. You are not supposed to do that. You're supposed to drain the blood out. It is sacred to God. So the blood in an animal is the life force. That's God's part. That's sacred to him. You don't eat that, but you can eat the flesh. That's fine. And the people are so hungry that they are ignoring that precept, which not great behavior on the part of the people, but it also shows extremely poor leadership on the part of Saul to let them get to a place where they would be hungry enough and desperate enough that they would commit that sin, which shows us something of the relationship between the leadership of the king and the behavior of the people, and is a foreshadowing of things to come. So Saul hears that this is happening. What does he decide to do? He's not going to, in fairness, don't want to be too critical of Saul. He doesn't want the people doing that. He recognizes it's bad. He has them roll out a big rock, set it up, and use it to drain all the blood from the animals, and tries to get the people to stop sinning. So, good job there. And then, when everybody's done, he takes an official action taken by many of his more distant ancestors. He builds an altar to the Lord, which initially sounds great. You know, you build an altar, why? Usually to commemorate a great victory. There was one, usually as a place where its first use is offering a sacrifice to God. Circumstances are a little different here. When Saul builds this altar, it's one, already built. Two, it's a sign of remembering that the people sinned against God, not a great and holy victory. And three, it's the only one he ever builds. Although he does manage to build some great large statues to himself. So, yeah, he builds an altar. Awesome. Good job, I guess, guy. But the implications of what that is and what that isn't, and of what his leadership led the people to do before he stopped them, in general cast some doubt over the whole entirety of his kingship to date, and again foreshadow that perhaps there could be problems moving forward. Glorious victory. Saul has had his army go all day without any kind of nourishment and just keep going, and then they pause briefly for dinner, and then he has the brilliant idea of, we're not done yet, let's also stay up all night and continue to murder Philistines, because it's going to be super easy to find more people to kill in the dark. So that's the plan, and he brings everybody together and calls the priests and says, hey, let's get God's blessing on this, because, you know, I wouldn't want to mess up, you know, like we've been doing all day long. So they ask, and for some reason, not sure why, God doesn't answer. And so Saul thinks it over and decides, it must be because someone else has sinned. That thing that happened earlier today where Samuel told me I had sinned and I was cut off from being the king because of how badly I'd sinned, it's not that. And the part where we were all just eating meat with the blood in it, it's not that. Someone else has sinned, and we have to find out who it is, because that's why God's not talking to me now. So, and this is how they did things at the time, and it very quickly goes out of style, and comes back again briefly in the New Testament. If you remember back to Saul's coronation and being called to the kingship, although God had initially first established and talked to Samuel, and Saul was anointed, so he was king before he was king, then to get everybody on board, they cast lots to determine who was the king, and it, surprise, surprise, came up Saul. And there was a great deal of faith in this particular method at this particular time, which, as long as God is acting in the people, is great. But, you know, there's always the chance, if God's already not talking to you, there's always the chance that he may not make the dice come up the right way too. But here we are. Everybody still thinks, yep, this will do it, and it does. We'll figure out who sinned. And Saul very insistently, we're going to figure out who sinned against the Lord. It doesn't matter who it is. I'm going to kill him, kill whoever it is, even if it's Jonathan, my own son. So let's split all the people into parties. All of you sinners over here, and Jonathan and I'll stand over here, and it'll be fine. And then Saul and Jonathan come up. Notice he didn't say, even if it's me, we'll kill whoever it is. It's even if it's Jonathan. So at this point, everybody's probably thinking exactly that. Well, Saul, what if it's you? You said you'd kill Jonathan. We're going to see either that or what happens if it's you. And suddenly it becomes way more interesting for everybody, and a little fun to watch maybe, for everybody who's not Saul or Jonathan. Because it really is a question of what's going to happen next. At the very least, nobody's dozing off or inattentive at that point. So they cast the lots again, comes up, it's Jonathan. Jonathan sinned. Saul says, Jonathan, why did you sin? What did you do? He said, well, you know, when you made that oath to God, nobody told me, so I ate a little honey. Whoops. But okay, I get it. We're in a situation here. Kill me if you need to. Saul says, yep, that's totally what we're going to do. At this point, I think it's probably fair to say there hasn't been a lot of time for communication, too much murdering going on. Probably Saul doesn't yet know that it's Jonathan's fault that the victory was won either. So all of the people step forward and say, wait, we just won against incredible odds, and it was Jonathan's fault. And the thing we're going to do as a result of that is kill him because you made a note that he didn't know about. That doesn't seem right. So the people plead on behalf of Jonathan. And then the language is extremely interesting. They ransom him from death. This idea of a death committed to God, it comes up later in even this lesson and harkens back very clearly to the idea of the ban, of a thing that is sacred to, is promised to God, and is a death that God is entitled to. And when God gets to take a life like that, the way that you save it is you have to ransom it, which is why all the firstborn of Israel after the 10th plague, the murdering of the firstborn, had to be ransomed. They had to be bought back from God. The idea here of exactly how it is that Jonathan is ransomed is not very clear. It comes across as it's just everybody pleading for him, but there's also a sense that something has to be given in exchange for the life that's saved. So it's extremely possible that people offered part of the spoils of war to the Lord for the sake of Jonathan's life as well. Not clear, but what is clear is all of the soldiers step in and say, nope, we shouldn't kill Jonathan. We should do whatever we can to spare his life. Which makes sense because he is braver and better at killing Philistines than his dad by a lot. Battle over, victory won, crisis resolved, glorious victory against the Philistines as an example. Specifically one highlighting Jonathan's bravery and Saul's ineptitude as a military commander. But glorious victory. So, now we zoom out a little bit and kind of summarize. Remember, we've heard Saul not going to keep being king, so we're going to kind of summarize some of his military career, which the author does very charitably. He fights against all of his enemies on all sides, gets the better of it, but also notice the people wanted the king to not just sort of get the better of it, but to get rid of the problem of enemies on all sides. And there are still enemies on all sides. So although winning is better than losing, it's not too far away from being a stalemate. So that's great. We also see, and it will be important to note moving forward, Saul's military commander is his uncle Abner. So, we're winning. Yay. In summary again, Saul's reign, generally successful militarily, if not everything everybody had hoped for. So now we zoom into another example of that, wherein Samuel, in talking with God, discerns that it is finally time to get back at those pesky Amalekites who, when the Israelites were on their way out of Egypt, attempted to stand in their way and stop them. And there was the whole thing with Moses raising his arms, and they would win, and getting tired and lowering them, and they'd get the worst of it, and then people eventually had to prop them up, and they won. Again, glorious victory, in which at that point their leader actually positively contributed. And cool, we won, we're going to hightail it out of here like we were planning to, but now God says, cool, it's time to finish this, and I want you to go kill them. And not just kill them, but he revives a concept from that time, which is potentially never passed, but he wants to make sure everybody understands the idea of the ban, utterly destroy. So everything to do with them has to be destroyed. So that's the people, that's all other stuff. It's everything you find destroyed. I'm going to deliver into your hands this glorious victory over these enemies who have definitely had it coming for a long time. So that's the plan. They get there. They see that some people who actually helped them back in those days are with the Amalekites, and they say, hey, Kenites, scram, we don't want to kill you with them. We just want to kill them, because that's what God told us to do. So far, so good. God said, go kill them, destroy all their stuff. I'll be on your side. They go, they let the good guys out, and then they proceed to kill them. So far, so good, except the miss a part. They don't get rid of the stuff. So, first of all, and from Saul's point of view, you can kind of understand this, they take the king prisoner instead of killing him. If you yourself are a king, it's maybe not that great to set the precedent that killing kings is okay. So you can kind of see his reasoning, except for the part where God explicitly said, kill them all and destroy all their stuff. So that one may be a little understandable and forgivable, but then there's the part where all of their best stuff they keep. So we did the part where we kill them and we benefit from it. We didn't do the part where we don't benefit from it and we just do it because God told us to. So there is a problem that has arisen in Israel. So, we want a glorious victory. God said, go, kill all the Amalekites, all of them, and destroy all of their stuff. And we won, we beat the Amalekites, we destroyed their crappy stuff, we kept their good stuff, and their king is alive. God sent that word to Saul via Samuel. If you remember, Saul and God are not necessarily on speaking terms right now. So Samuel, in the role of a prophet, is go-between. God says to Samuel, hey buddy, something's up here. He didn't do what we told him to. So Samuel, understandably, is not pleased, in fact, angry. And again, God's basically, I know we already talked about this, Samuel, but this guy is not my king. And I'm sorry that he ever was. So then Samuel gets to go have a come to Jesus, or I guess Yahweh, talk with Saul. And he shows up, and so Saul, meanwhile, has been commemorating. Remember, last victory we read about him winning, he already had a stone down, and he said, I guess we'll build an altar. This time, we want a glorious victory. I'll build a monument to me. Even though God told him to do it and clearly delivered victory, the monument is built to Saul and not to God. Kind of shows where Saul's relationship with God is. So Samuel shows up, and Saul says, hey, thanks for the tip, Samuel. Did everything you asked. We beat those guys. It was great. We destroyed some stuff. This whole passage reads great. Samuel's rants are amazing. This one does not disappoint. Cool. So it's basically, oh, cool. You destroyed all the stuff. What's that I hear? I hear sheep and oxen. Where'd those come from? He said, well, not that stuff. The other stuff. We kept that to sacrifice to, and this is a key and important word, the Lord your God. Not the Lord my God, the Lord your God. So we were going to sacrifice it, promise. That's the only reason we kept it, is to offer it as a sacrifice to your God. But yeah, we'll get right to that. So Samuel is understandably not overly impressed by this response. And so again, which is becoming a theme when we talk about the reign of Saul, we have a problem. Where we left off, Samuel is in the middle of chewing out Saul. Saul won glorious victory that God told him to win, and God also added a few other riders, namely, kill everyone, destroy all of their stuff. Saul's version of that was kill everyone but their king and destroy the stuff we don't want. and keep the king alive because that would set a bad precedent, and keep the good stuff. To sacrifice to the Lord your God. So Samuel plays along and basically says, hey Saul, okay, cool. I totally believe you that you were going to sacrifice that to God. Let's conduct a little thought experiment here. Saying that that is actually what you were going to do, and benefit of the doubt, which makes God happier? He tells you to do a thing, you don't do it, and then you murder some animals for him, which you were supposed to do anyway, or you just do what he told you. Which is better? Pretty easy answer, but again, it's easy to be hard on Saul and not hard enough on ourselves. How often do we do the same thing? Yeah, God, I know you don't like it when I do this, so, I mean, I'm going to do it just a little bit, and then I'm going to do something else for you. That's just as good, right? Like, I don't have to do what you told me to. I can please you in a different way. So, that's just as good, right? But we do that, or maybe, hopefully, not all of you do that. I do that, and it is definitely human nature to do that. So I'm sure at least some of you do that or have done that. Because it's just how, bargaining, it's how we think. It's, yeah, well, no, I'm not going to do that, but I'll do this, I guess, sometimes, maybe, if I'm in the mood, which means never. But Samuel, again, speaking as a prophet and the voice of God, is underwhelmed. And Saul, probably just by the look on his face after this whole exchange, is thinking, yeah, he's not buying it. What else can I do? And in the characteristic that we've seen Saul develop of self-interest and self-preservation, he now still wants something from Samuel. Specifically, Samuel is the one who said, hey, you should go attack the Amalekites because God wants you to, and you will win a glorious victory, which happened. So now, to kind of round out the whole thing and to solidify the fact that Saul was actually involved and it wasn't just Samuel and God, Saul kind of needs to be seen with Samuel. And preferably in a not chewing out context. So he really wants to go back to the people and have Samuel with him, which has to be on his mind in this. So, and I think that probably motivates his response, because remember, he spent the last 5 or 6 answers denying that any wrong was committed, and now he changes his tune slightly. Yeah, the people definitely did that. Never mind the whole keeping the king alive part. He doesn't even really get into that. It's, yeah, the people kept the stuff, and I just didn't, I just didn't have the heart to, I can make them fight all day without eating, and I can suggest that they continue to fight all night in a different occasion, but in this one, just telling them to, do what they were told, I'm not going to do that. I don't have any control over these things. They were just going to do it. And so, I guess that happened, and I'm sorry about it. Real sorry. I promise. So could you just please, come back to camp with me, and we can, and I'll worship the Lord, your God. It's a really bad sign when the king who's supposed to be, he is serving in the place of God, who is the king before, and is very much responsible for keeping the people in line with their relationship with God, is disavowing that God is his. Pretty much sums up the entirety of his problem. Again, tall and handsome, maybe not the best criteria for finding a king. When we rectify this, almost immediately, the major criterion we're going to use to determine leadership for the king is surprisingly also not the ability to pull a sword from a stone, which at one point indicated divine right to rule, or so the legend goes in England, but actually loving and caring about doing the will of God is going to become the criterion for choosing the next king and for choosing every truly great king serving in place of God, which is where we see Jesus fulfilling everything that is intended by the role of a king. But that's totally not Saul, and we're going to keep seeing that happen. So we continue to be in the midst of Saul getting chewed out by Samuel. We've gotten to the part of the conversation where Saul needs something from Samuel, so he's changed his tone a little bit and is at least trying to play nice. So now we see him do the hard sell on what he wants is, really, you need to come back with me so everybody knows that I was involved in this victory, and it wasn't just you and God. And Samuel continues. Some of the best burns in the Bible are Samuel talking to various people about how badly they've screwed up. He really has quite a way with words when he gets frustrated. And you can see why people would both be interested in following him and extremely interested in not getting on his bad side. And in this particular version, it's, why do you think, it's not me who's not going back with you, why do you think God would change his mind? He's not like you, where you just changed your mind from saying, no, I didn't sin at all, to, no, yeah, I totally did that, but actually the people did it. But yeah, that happened. God, not like you, or more importantly, as we see in determining who should be king, you, not like God. But God's not going to just change his mind and have this be okay. So I'm not going back with you. And so Saul, in his desperation, actually tries to keep him from leaving, grabs onto his robe. He keeps trying to leave. His robe tears, which means there was some force involved on both sides. And then he says, yeah, you know, like that just happened, that's what's going to happen to the kingdom. God is going to tear the kingdom away from you like you just ruined my clothes. So Samuel seems pretty committed to his ways, and then strangely and suddenly we see, yeah, sure, I'll go back with you, which, based on the whole preceding conversation, seems a little out of character. And it seems a little odd, but it becomes almost immediately apparent what's going on. So we'll get there presently. So we've just seen Samuel uncharacteristically agree to go back to the people with Saul. This would be super pleasing to Saul, who gets to be seen with Samuel and join in taking credit for the glorious military victory. Turns out Samuel has another agenda, and it's not to let everybody think Saul is great, which we know he wouldn't do because he doesn't agree. So he arrives back, and he says, oh yeah, you took that, I guess you took that king prisoner or whatever. I'd kind of like to meet him. Which point they summon the king of the Amalekites, who comes, and at that point, he's feeling pretty good. All his people might have been murdered, but he's been spared, and he's thinking, I think I'm going to be okay. This could be interesting. So he arrives, and pretty much immediately, Samuel grabs a sword and cuts off his head, which, as you remember, is what God wanted to have done. Few interesting things here. First of all, no one feels like they can in any way reproach Samuel for acting against what have been the clear wishes of the king. Nobody's saying, oh, Samuel, you shouldn't have done that. Saul didn't want anyone to do that. Everybody just rolls with it, showing the relative position of the two. Samuel definitely has, which is exactly why Saul wanted to be seen with Samuel. Samuel has more power among the people than Saul does, even though Saul is king. Second, we see a really interesting precedent set the prophet doesn't mind killing kings at all. And when he's already been explicitly mentioning, Saul, you have screwed up a lot, that has to be a little alarming for Saul. Especially, again, when everybody just rolls with it. Saul has to be feeling a little uncomfortable in the presence of Samuel. But lucky for him, he never sees him again in Samuel's lifetime. I'm not going to say Saul's lifetime, but I don't want to spoil anything. But they part ways, so he also does not get the benefit of Samuel blessing the glorious victory. Samuel just comes, does what everybody knows was supposed to happen that Saul didn't do, and then splits. So Saul does not get what he wanted. Samuel follows through on the will of God, and then doesn't talk to Saul again. This has been an overview of Lesson 4 of the Turn into God's Word Bible Study, The United Kingdom of Israel, Foreshadowing the Reign of Christ the King. For more information, consult our written study, and visit us online at turningtogodsword.com.